Meteorologist and storm specialist Mike Seidel is with us, as he has been all morning. Introduced yesterday as the newest member of the Fox Weather Team. He's in Steinhatchee, Florida, continuing his coverage from the Sunshine State, where, Mike, let's face it, there isn't an awful lot of sunshine, but more clouds today.
Yeah, that's a good thing for anybody that's outside. It's not going to be great beach weather today and tomorrow on the Gulf Coast of Florida, the West Coast, and parts of the Gulf Coast. Now, you get all the way west, say, towards Destin and Pensacola, they're not going to be impacted by this storm. In the meantime, we stand out here on the Steinhatchee River. This is where they had that high storm surge from Idalia almost a year ago, late August, up to 14 feet. In fact, the water on the gauge came up 8 feet in 1 hour. The Gulf of Mexico is around the corner and about a mile from here. So we're just inland just a bit. There are no beaches in this part of Florida. It's mostly a low-level, low-lying and swampland. Light winds coming downriver. There are a few boats out this morning. The cloud cover helping keeping the temperatures down. But all eyes are on Debby, now a 60-mile-an-hour tropical storm. So that's a mid-range storm. And the track will bring it up here to the Big Bend with landfall later tomorrow morning around midday. And at that point, it's forecast to be a Category 1 hurricane. That could change. It could be stronger. It could be weaker. But you prepare for at least a Cat 1, even a Cat 2 hurricane, and then we're off and running. The problem here is going to be, again, it's the concave coast of the Big Bend area. It goes like this. The Panhandle comes around this area, the southeast, south wind, then southwest wind pulls the water, pushes it right into this area like a funnel, and goes right into where we're sitting. So we're looking at a storm surge forecast by the Hurricane Center of 6 to 10 feet, lower than last year. Now, remember, Idalia last year came in from the southwest. This one's going to come in from the south-southwest, but Idalia was much stronger. Remember, it was a Cat 4 briefly in the Gulf, and then when it came in and finally made landfall just to our west, around Ketel Beach, it was a low-end Cat 3. So we're not looking at a major hurricane, but certainly a low-end, a Category 1 hurricane at landfall. And then it's all about the rainfall, too, because there's a lot of moisture. On the radar, it's now beginning to rotate in towards the Tampa area, coming up through Sarasota, Siesta Key into St. Pete, and then into Tampa. Robert Ray will be live at 11 a.m. Eastern on Fox Weather. And then the rain and storms will get up here later on today. The worst of the weather here will be certainly well after midnight, and tomorrow is crunch time in this area. We're already thinking about our plan because we're not going to be here on the river because it's going to be too dangerous with that surge forecast of 10 feet. In fact, this whole area was rebuilt basically after Idalia last August. That restaurant there, the Good Time restaurant, is all brand new. All these cabins are pretty much brand new and rebuilt. So they're they're hoping that they don't have a repeat of what they had just about 1 year ago with Idalia. So Ian and Kendall, we're watching and waiting, but right now very quiet here. Just preps going on continuously here in Steinhatchee, here in the Big Bend area of Florida.
Thankfully overcast, not the 110-degree heat index that folks had yesterday, making preparations all up and down the coast. It looks almost pleasant. I hate to say that.
It is. It is. It's really comfortable out here by Florida standards compared to being on the beach yesterday with that heat index above 100 degrees. That's the one positive thing we have going today. And one other quick thing, the key to the surge and how high it gets is also the time of the high tides. High tide, 4 a.m. and about 3 p.m. on Monday here at Steinhatchee. So the low tide is a few minutes after 7, 9:07 a.m. So if we can get the worst of the surge around low tide, that will save us about 2.5, maybe 3 feet of water rise. We'll see how it all times out. It's impossible to say right now in forecast exactly when that water is going to come right up here to the docks here in Steinhatchee.
So we know that, unfortunately, devastating impacts likely in Steinhatchee tomorrow, but we just hope, fingers crossed, like you said, Mike, that we have that landfall timing up with low tide. That would be the best case scenario. But as always, we'll be checking in with you throughout the day. Mike, thank you so much.
We're in the last critical hours now of preparing for this, so we want to head down to just north of Holmes Beach in Steinhatchee, Florida, where Fox Weather storm specialist Mike Seidel is standing by. Mike, what a difference 24 hours makes. We had a couple bands of showers yesterday when you were down there off North Reddington Beach. Yeah. But you go a little further up the coast, and how are things shaping up?
Well, we're watching what's going to come up through here on the Steinhatchee. We're on the Steinhatchee with Captain Jack, and we're looking out towards the Gulf of Mexico. We're only about a mile from the open waters, so we're right off the Gulf waters. This is the Sea Hag Marina, and notice the lack of boats. They've been pulling boats out of here through the morning hours and getting them up on higher ground. Some of these boats will ride it out like they did with Adalia. Now with Adalia, we had an 8-foot surge in 1 hour, and some of the gauges were up to 12 to 14 feet. The water just comes right up the river here in Steinhatchee. We're in the Big Bend area of Florida, that concave-shaped area. Fortunately, not a lot of population. Beautiful area, a lot of fishing going on here. Last night they were cleaning scallops. I got to taste some fresh scallops right out of the Gulf. So the water comes in here with the onshore flow. That has not started, obviously, but that will start to kick in tomorrow morning. And the key is, how much storm surge do we get? The Hurricane Center is going with 6 to 10 feet. That's lower than they had with Adalia. Remember, Adalia was a low-end Cat 3, a major hurricane when it made landfall, and before that it was a Cat 4 in the Gulf. The forecast for Debby is a Cat 1. So we'll see how it all shakes out. How much does it intensify today and tonight? And then what do we wake up to in the morning? Remember with Opal in 1995, went to bed with a Cat 1, woke up with a Cat 3. We hope that doesn't happen. The other concern is, when does the push of water come in? Does it come in corresponding to low tide? That would be the best option. Low tide tomorrow is 9:07 a.m. here in Steinhatchee. High tide is around 4 a.m. and then again around 3 p.m. So if we can get the top surge, the highest water getting pushed up the Steinhatchee and all these other areas at low tide, that'll save us about 2.5 or 3 feet of water. Notice how calm the water is right now as we are now going basically west towards the Gulf of Mexico. And notice there's a lot of property out here, and notice everything is up on stilts. I mean, really, there's no reason to build anything where you're going to live in this house right here to our left, all on stilts, and protecting them from the surge. The only issue here would be keeping your car safe. And we've already got a plan in place to be at a higher spot tomorrow as the hurricane at that point, forecast to be a hurricane, comes in. And don't forget, the rainfall totals are going to be prolific. A foot, maybe a foot or more right in this area. So Jane and Nick, we just keep watching and waiting. The models, the trends, right now it's certainly overloaded on the east side, and that's the side that's producing the rain already now arriving into the Tampa Bay area at this hour.
Yeah, a little lopsided this storm is right now, but we're going to watch as that organization continues to come together. Mike, stay right there. We're going to bring in, of course, our very own Brian Norcross to join the conversation. Brian, you know, about an hour ago we get the update from the NHC anticipating some rapid intensification to occur. What's your take as we kind of go through the next couple of hours?
I think we're being saved by the fact that there's a lot of dry air in the Gulf. I'd be interested, Mike, if you, I know you're there on the river and may not be able to analyze everything, but I've been trying to figure out exactly what's driving this dry air into the west side of this system, because if that wasn't holding it back, there's really nothing I see that would keep this thing from turning into a significant hurricane, even stronger than forecast, stronger than a Category 1 moving north. But we have kind of a half a storm that is performing, you might even say overperforming for a half a storm and continuing to intensify. But it's only the right half, the Florida half. The other half really is very dried out. Mike, any thoughts?
Yeah, isn't that the case? Yeah, isn't that the case, Brian? We see with tropical storms that the left side and the right side, it's always a situation where generally the east side or the right side is the wetter side until you get the convection to wrap around. I don't think this thing is really going to be off and running to a Cat 1 or Cat 2 in the short term.
Yeah, the question is, can it wrap around? Because it's kind of trying, but boy, all the models analyze a lot of dry air, and I checked to see how much shear there was pushing the dry air toward it, and it's 5 to 10 out.
America's weather team is positioned across the southeast, bringing you exclusive coverage all weekend. And this morning, we welcome meteorologist and storm specialist Mike Seidel to the Fox Weather family. He joins us from North Reddington Beach, Florida. It's roughly 30 miles or so from downtown Tampa. Mike, Your career, it's taken you to almost every state in the United States, even outside the country. Cuba, for example, you were the first meteorologist to report live from Cuba during Tropical Storm Isaac in 2012. I bring that up only because the newest advisory came out from the Hurricane Center. Cuba, really the only thing in its way before we have this eventual tropical storm emerge into the Gulf.
Exactly, and once it gets into the water or the Gulf, it's not going to have any interaction with land, the friction with the higher hills and mountains of Cuba. So we're going to see how fast it intensifies. The official forecast does bring it up to a tropical storm later on today. Hurricane watches are up for certainly the Big Bend area that's north of here. The track, as they mentioned, has not changed too much. It's going to come up and then start to go north and then northeast and then hook back towards the Big Bend, the area. Very unpopulated, fortunately, but for those up there like in Steinhatchee and Slopchoppy, in those areas north of Cedar Key, very susceptible to storm surge because of the bathymetry or the shape of the coast. It just doesn't go like that. It's very shallow, so the water will rush up. Speaking of water, the tide is coming in. We got these pools the kids like to play in, even myself. And we've had a little bit of beach erosion over the past couple days, but this is about 6 or 7 inches. But I'm looking right towards the hotel, and there is no elevation really, all the way up. It's basically flat. So you bring the water up 2 or 3 feet, that's the forecast surge, then it's going to cover the whole beach at some point tomorrow. Again, it's all a function, too, of the high tide. The high tide tomorrow is around lunchtime here at Clearwater Beach, North Reddington, out on the Gulf Coast. So we'll keep an eye on that, certainly. So we got the surge issue and then the heavy rainfall issue. 6 to 10 inches of rain, plus or minus, across the west coast of Florida. And you know what that means? Ponding, flash flooding. There'll be a flood watch. That's a given, issued by the Weather Service out of Tampa Bay and Ruskin, coming up at some point later this afternoon. In the meantime, temperature now 88 at Tampa. Heat index is up to double 9, so we have double 8s and double 9s. And it's a hot day out here. We've got the heat advisory. Values could hit 110 this afternoon. The only saving grace is we will have showers and clouds coming up. On the radar, we've got them already in southwest Florida, Lee, Collier County, across the Alligator Alley. Also storms now and showers in South Florida. So eventually those are going to propagate in this direction and at least knock back the sunshine and hopefully knock back the temperatures, although it'll take care of the beach weather. And then the real muscle of this storm, expected to be a storm shortly, will impact here tomorrow, late tonight, tomorrow, and tomorrow night. In fact, on the track, it goes by our latitude from south to north sometime mid to late tomorrow morning. But that doesn't mean things are going to just end. No, there's a lot of rain bands, feeder bands on the forecast models on the backside, on the south and southwest side. And in those feeder bands, you have to be concerned about a possible tornado or two, a quick spin up. So we got everything in the mix: the storm surge, the localized inland flooding, potential for some severe weather. Wind gusts, that's a big question. 40 miles an hour, do we get a 50-mile-an-hour gust? Fortunately, until you get up to 60, you usually don't have too many issues with power. So we're going to think optimistically, at least here in the Tampa Bay area, that power is a minimal issue, a minimal impact with what is to become Debby shortly.
Looks like a lot of folks behind you, Mike, are thinking optimistically today, too. Pitching tents, enjoying it, you know. Got a nice day out there on the beach with the sun. Appreciate it. Thanks for the perspective. And again, welcome to the team. Fox Weather Storm Specialist Mike Seidel joining us here now. We want to gain a...
All right, Fox Weather Storm Specialist Mike Seidel joins us now from Steinhatchee, Florida, with the latest on Tropical Storm Debby. Mike, what's going on out there, sir?
Well, we do have a mandatory evacuation, Nick, for this county. This is Dixie County, and that includes those flood-prone areas like here in Steinhatchee, which really got hit hard with Idalia, last August, with that 10 to 14-foot storm surge. I've mentioned this morning, all of this property here has been basically rebuilt. Now, these are floating docks. They'll go up with the surge and the rise in the water. All of these boats here, these pontoon boats, the regular boats over there with the outboard motors, all of these boats are tied down now, as tight as they can be. I mean, they've really tied them down tight. Right here you can see some of the tie downs. And this is where they're going to ride out what is likely to become a hurricane soon and make landfall in the Big Bend area tomorrow. Other evacuations including Levy County, and that's home to Cedar Key. Cedar Key is extremely flood prone. Remember last year they had about a 6 to 8 foot surge and everything went underwater, except there's a high spot where you can park your cars, and that's about it. So that's a good call there, because the road out there will go underwater and then you get cut off. So those are the mandatory evacuations. Wind is still coming downriver, so it's east at about 10 to 12 miles an hour. We've had some gusts upwards about 20 miles an hour, so that's gradually increasing. No rain so far, but on the radar you can see those rainfall bands which have really been attacking the coast, the southwest coast earlier, and now into the Tampa Bay area. You saw Robert Ray earlier, Clearwater Beach, and he's starting to get in that heavy rain, gusty winds. And some of the cameras we've been showing you the waves really crashing on the beaches down around Naples and Venice. Here, the worst of the weather comes in later on this evening. We'll start to get some of those bands in here, in fact, late this afternoon. And then we'll deal with the increasing wind. And as that storm, Debby, again forecast to become a hurricane, makes that turn to the northeast into the Big Bend, we think it'll go into our west. That it's going to pile the water up here into the Big Bend area and right up through the Steinhatchee River, and that's why we're certainly going to take heed of that. We've got a higher place to go if needed tomorrow morning. Rainfall totals, we can't harp on this enough. If you're inland, flash flooding is going to be an issue. We've already had flash flood warnings issued south of here. The flood watch here goes until Tuesday, and then inland areas got pummeled. And Nick and Jane, the real concern after this is certainly the fact that the models are showing this slowing down. And when you have a slow-moving tropical system, it really becomes more about the rainfall and not the wind. I covered a tropical depression in Mobile Bay years ago, and we ended up with about 30 inches of rain. And how about Florence in North Carolina in 2017, 25 to 30 inches of rain. So when you have a slow-moving system like that, it just rains itself out, and it's all about the flooding. River flooding, street flooding, it's horrible. Flooding is the worst, especially, it gets into the house, remediation. Some houses you just have to plow down. So we're hoping for the best, but right now it does look pretty grim on the maps for the southeast U.S. on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, maybe even to the Thursday, because we just have no steering flow at that point.
Yeah, unfortunately for a part of the country, too, that is so prone to flooding. Low country, the Carolinas, down there into Georgia. So great reporting as always. Mike, we're so glad to have you on the team. I'm interested to hope that those people really listen to those mandatory evacuations up there in the Big Bend, get to that safe place again. You don't have to go far, but you just have to get to a safe spot away from where that immediate surge and those dangers are coming.
If you think about it, Jane, people that have not been through this in a while, they forget. These people went through this not even a year ago with the Dahlia, surge up to 14 feet. So they're not messing around. They know how bad it was last year, and they're heading out of town right now.
Yeah, Mike, sometimes, there's always a silver lining when it comes to these storms. You don't like to learn that way. We were just talking with Robert Ray, where he's at in Clearwater. They're under every kind of watch and warning imaginable, as are you, and then some, right? That's potentially going to be ground zero for Debby as we head into tonight and tomorrow.
Exactly. Tomorrow, late morning, mid-morning, sometime in that area around lunchtime, we expect the landfall somewhere probably just to our west. They're doing a little construction over here, I guess they're trying to get that loop, that metal thing around the pole to keep the dock more secure. These are all floating docks, by the way, so they'll rise as the tide rises, and we're expecting a 6 to 10 inch I'm sorry, I wish it was 6 to 10 inches, 6 to 10 foot storm surge. That's the latest forecast. And they did not increase that with the 11 a.m. update, although they did say that they're expecting the maximum sustained winds to come on shore at 90 miles an hour, which is a high-end Cat 1 as Debby makes landfall. This is the Steinhatchee River. All these boats here have been tied down. All the pontoon boats are tied very tightly. So that's where they'll sit and ride out what will likely be a hurricane. They rode out Hurricane Idalia here last year, late August, and they had a 10 to 14 foot storm surge. All this is basically new construction. So they're cleaning up, packing up, getting out, and that's going to be the case because of the mandatory evacuation in these flood-prone low-lying areas here in the county. The wind has not really picked up that much. It's still running downriver, I should say downriver, yes, downriver at about 10 to 15 miles an hour. And as we go through tonight and tomorrow, the winds will become more onshore, and then we'll get that big push, that surge coming up the river. And all these areas, the barrier island like Seidel Beach, where the landfall was for Idalia. Rainfall's also on the docket, a lot of rainfall, a foot or more on areas that have had a fair amount of rain. There was a lot of ponding yesterday when we had the storm here. So that tells you basically that the ground is saturated in addition to the rain that fell yesterday. And it's already pelting the Tampa Bay area. And you can see on the radar the rotation, and it's rolling right up the Nature Coast and will come into the Big Bend area in the next few hours, certainly by mid to late afternoon. And then tomorrow is the worst of the weather with the winds howling, gusts over hurricane force. That'll knock out at least some power. We'll have the storm surge issues. The flood watch here in this part of the state goes until Tuesday morning. In Tampa Bay, it goes through Monday night. So a lot ahead of us, and it's already beginning to impact the Gulf Coast, the west coast of Florida. And Nick and Jane, it'll be up here shortly. And then overnight tonight, things will really ramp up as Debby makes its approach and makes landfall. It'll be interesting to see how strong it does get. We still have the dry air, but there's still indications that it will make hurricane status before it makes landfall.
Yeah, I think that's a very real bet at this point that we're going to see those impacts as we go through tomorrow morning. Interesting to hear, you know, the final preparations finally coming together, like the bang of the hammer, the boats getting tied up. You know, I think seeing that visual really puts it into perspective how you should be preparing for this storm and then hunkering down once it comes in.
Yeah, and also don't forget the severe weather threat. There is now a tornado watch. And I think there'll be additional tornado watches. The first one covers most of the state of Florida on the peninsula and into the Big Bend area, but most of the state, but not a good majority of the panhandle. And that goes until 8 p.m. Eastern tonight. And I'm sure they'll be issuing additional watches because those feeder bands can get quick spin-ups. As the winds increase, we get that low level shear. We've already had, at least, as far as I know, Jane, at least a couple of tornado warnings radar indicated, but no reports of any touchdowns at this point.
No reports, but I think we've had at least a handful. You're right. I'd say about 6 at this point over the last couple of hours. And Mike, too, the flood threat, flash flood warnings just been issued for Naples for up to 4 inches of rain, 2 to 4 inch rain rates, too. So that's a pretty nasty band, all of that of which headed in your direction.
We were just talking with Robert Ray, where he's at in Clearwater. They're under every kind of watch and warning imaginable, as are you, and then some, right? That's potentially going to be ground zero for Debby as we head into tonight and tomorrow.
Exactly. Tomorrow, late morning, mid-morning, sometime in that area around lunchtime, we expect the landfall somewhere probably just to our west. They're doing a little construction over here, I guess they're trying to get that loop, that metal thing around the pole to keep the dock more secure. These are all floating docks, by the way, so they'll rise as the tide rises, and we're expecting a 6 to 10 inch, I'm sorry, I wish it was 6 to 10 inches, 6 to 10 foot storm surge. That's the latest forecast, and they did not increase that with the 11 a.m. update, although they did say that they're expecting the maximum sustained winds to come on shore at 90 miles an hour, which is a high-end Cat 1 as Debby makes landfall. This is the Steinhatchee River. All these boats here have been tied down. All the pontoon boats are tied very tightly, so that's where they'll sit and ride out what will likely be a hurricane. They rode out Hurricane Idalia here last year, late August, and they had a 10 to 14 foot storm surge. All this is basically new construction. So they're cleaning up, packing up, getting out, and that's going to be the case because of the mandatory evacuation in these flood-prone low-lying areas here in the county. The wind has not really picked up that much. It's still running downriver, I should say downriver, yes, downriver at about 10 to 15 miles an hour. And as we go through tonight and tomorrow, the winds will become more onshore, and then we'll get that big push, that surge coming up the river. And all these areas, the barrier island like Seidel Beach, where the landfall was for Idalia. Rainfall's also on the docket, a lot of rainfall, a foot or more on areas that have had a fair amount of rain. There was a lot of ponding yesterday when we had the storm here. So that tells you basically that the ground is saturated in addition to the rain that fell yesterday. And it's already pelting the Tampa Bay area. And you can see on the radar the rotation, and it's rolling right up the Nature Coast and will come into the Big Bend area in the next few hours, certainly by mid to late afternoon. And then tomorrow is the worst of the weather with the winds howling, gust over hurricane force. That'll knock out at least some power. We'll have the storm surge issues. The flood watch here in this part of the state goes until Tuesday morning. In Tampa Bay, it goes through Monday night. So a lot ahead of us, and it's already beginning to impact the Gulf Coast, the west coast of Florida. And Nick and Jane, it'll be up here shortly. And then overnight tonight, things will really ramp up as Debby makes its approach and makes landfall. It'll be interesting to see how strong it does get. We still have the dry air, but there's still indications that it will make hurricane status before it makes landfall.
Yeah, I think that's a very real bet at this point that we're going to see those impacts as we go through tomorrow morning. Interesting to hear, the final preparations finally coming together, like the bang of the hammer, the boats getting tied up. I think seeing that visual really puts it into perspective how you should be preparing for this storm and then hunkering down once it comes in.
Yeah, and also don't forget the severe weather threat. There is now a tornado watch. And I think there'll be additional tornado watches. The first one covers most of the state of Florida on the peninsula and into the Big Bend area, but most of the state, but not a good majority of the panhandle. And that goes until 8 p.m. Eastern tonight. And I'm sure they'll be issuing additional watches because those feeder bands can get quick spin-ups. As the winds increase, we get that low-level shear. We've already had, at least, as far as I know, Jane, at least a couple of tornado warnings radar indicated, but no reports of any touchdowns at this point.
No reports, but I think we've had at least a handful. You're right. I'd say about 6 at this point over the last couple of hours. And Mike, too, the flood threat, flash flood warning's just been issued for Naples for up to 4 inches of rain, 2 to 4 inch rain rates, too. So that's a pretty nasty band, all of that of which headed in your direction.
Happening there in Florida. Let's bring you now Fox Weather, we're your Hurricane HQ, and of course, we're going to be talking about this team coverage throughout this event. And now it's time to talk to our newest member that's out there in the field.
Yeah, let's go right out to Fox Weather storm specialist Mike Seidel. He's live in Steinhatchee. Mike, you were not too far away from this. What was it? Just a little bit less than a year ago for Idalia, and same story for folks down in Southwest Florida that are getting beat up this afternoon. Folks have a similar set of circumstances on the way.
Yeah, it looks very similar. The difference is Idalia, remember, was a Cat 4. It did weaken to a low-end Cat 3 before it made landfall that morning on the coast here near Keto Beach in the Big Bend area of Florida. So we're not far from where it made landfall, and we're expecting that Debby will make landfall in the same area, likely just to our west, which is the dirty side of the storm. Where we're going to be, it's just going to push the water on up Steinhatchee River. We went out on a boat, and it's only about literally a 5 or 6 minute boat ride out to the Gulf. Just around the corner, you can see the open waters of the Gulf of Mexico. Out here, notice all the boats that were here earlier looking in the foreground and in the distance are gone. They've all been pulled out. There's the boat bull. They call that the boat bull, and that is what is moving boats. It's a big, giant forklift. It's got carpet on those 2 arms so they don't scratch the boats. And we'll just, Ben, keep the camera on there. We'll show you what's going on over there. And this has been going on since first light this morning. They'll go in and they'll pick up a boat and they'll take it to higher ground. In the background is what I call the boatel. They were here last year. Those buildings did not get lost by the winds of Idalia, but they have taken the boats out of the ground level to keep them out of the storm surge, which, by the way, is still forecast to be 6 to 10 by the National Hurricane Center. So we've got some boat owners over there. Here he goes. Now watch this. Here we are on Fox Weather Live late this afternoon or mid-afternoon, and there goes the boat. That looks like a pontoon boat coming out of the water, and they'll take that to higher ground again. This has been going on nonstop since about 7 a.m. This morning. So far, no rain here, but on radar you can see just offshore we've had some showers and some gustier winds. In fact, we'll spin around right now, and this is looking out towards those showers on the radar. They're not very strong, nothing like they've seen so far on the west coast, south of Tampa, down around the Fort Myers area and Venice, seeing some of the cameras down there. Boy, not only the rain, but you can notice how the wind has had an impact on increasing the surf. So the surge is going to come up the river later on tonight, Monday morning, 6 to 10. Well, where does that put the water? It probably puts it into the, certainly under these buildings, these condos, Airbnbs, which have been here for a while, not a very long time, but notice how high up they're built. And there's no way, in fact, they wrote out Adalia, they didn't have any issues. There's no way the water is going to get that high, but we're concerned that if it gets up to 8, 9, 10 feet, we're going to have some more impacts. This whole area basically was rebuilt following Adalia. In fact, the restaurant just reopened about 6 months ago. So they're hoping and praying that they don't have another situation like they had almost a year ago in late August. Rainfall, the other issue, ground here saturated. So we've got the flood watch up through Tuesday, into Tuesday here in this part of the area. And here in Dixie County, also Levy County, and parts of, I believe, Franklin County, the areas that are susceptible to coastal flooding, like where we are, the few beach areas, the low-lying areas, all now under a mandatory evacuation ahead of Debby. So, Steve Bender, I know you're watching it closely, waiting for the 5 p.m. the 5 p.m. update from the Hurricane Center. Also, I've got to get on my phone and look at the latest European model, but I'm guessing if you've looked at that, or the GFS, the American model, that the key is it going to slow down still early next week? Because you know, you slow down these tropical systems, they just rain themselves out. I mentioned earlier I covered a depression in Mobile Bay years ago, and we had 30 to 35 inches of rain. Ooh. Remember Harvey in Houston, Florence in the Carolinas in 2017. Many, many examples of slow-moving systems that just throw on the brakes. I remember Florence came in, I think the forward speed was 1 or 2 miles an hour, and you just get these rainfall totals.
Walking.
Yeah.
And not only river flooding, but you also get the, you know, the localized neighborhood and street flooding.
Mike, about your point with Florence, by the way, Elizabethtown, North Carolina got 35 inches of rain out of that event, a state record. But you were talking about the slow movement. This is after, once it passes Florida. Ian and I were talking about it's approaching on landfall, right, Ian? That's going to be a concern here.
Yeah, Mike, you made a really good point saying that the intensity of Adalia and Debby right now, they're not comparable, but Adalia was a storm that was decreasing in intensity on approach, and you've got Adalia, which we think will likely be intensifying. What are your thoughts about how that could impact the overall experience of moving through the next 24 hours or so?
Well, we still have dry air coming around the west and southwest side, but we also have convection now trying to wrap around on the west side, because this storm is certainly east side loaded. I see this, and we see this a lot with tropical storms, that they're often east side loaded on the east coast. I've covered many where, you know, we've been 40, 50 miles from the center, but all the action, all the weather is offshore. In this case, in the Gulf, the action is already impacting the west coast of Florida. But the key is, how much does it strengthen, and how much time does it have to strengthen? It's going to run out of water eventually in about another 12 to 16 hours. So that's going to put the kibosh on the strengthening. Overnight tonight, it's going to be interesting to see how organized it gets and what happens. Remember, with Beryl, it strengthened pretty quickly before landfall. So hopefully no last-minute surprises. I was covering, 1995. It was, oh my gosh, Opal on the coast of Florida, and you went to bed with a Cat 1 and you woke up with a Cat 3. We don't want to see anything like that happening with Debby.
Yeah, nothing like that. Something we'll be watching closely through the overnight hours, and of course tomorrow with our special coverage of this. Mike Seidel, it's good to talk with you, and we'll be continuing to talk with you throughout this entire event.